I'd love to bring back my cat, but he probably doesn't look too good nowadays. He died 8 years ago, so yeah.
I could help you with that.
Yeah. Welcome, friends and fans, to another edition of GalaxyCon Live, where we are bringing the convention experience directly to you. And today, we are going back to Miskatonic University with 5 fantastic guests from the Re-Animator films. So without further ado, let's grab our glowing green syringes, head to the morgue, and see what fun we can find. Our first guest is a writer, producer, and director whose body of works includes Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, The Guyver, and the Dentist film series, and more. Today joins us as the producer of the original film and director and writer of the sequel. Please welcome Brian Yuzna.
Hi, how are you?
I am well, sir. How are you?
I'm doing great.
Oh, so glad to have you here. And I really am I'm a tremendous fan of your body of work. Love to talk to you about it at like the time. I'll throw this out. I'm a big fan of your adaptation of Crying Freeman.
That was a good one.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's a very. I always thought when I first read it in the 80s, it was like, this needs some kind of a live action adaptation. And I thought you really did the source material credit. And that was a time when manga and even anime were still kind of unknown. So
no, I think actually Guyver was the first anime adapted to live action in the US.
Yes.
And Crying Freeman might have been the second.
Yeah, absolutely right. Absolutely right. And I'm a fan of Guyver as well, but I love Crying Freeman more. But I love Guyver, though. Great cast on Guyver as well.
You can't beat Christoph Gans's direction. Real vision.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, Brian, so glad to have you here. Thank you for joining us today.
My pleasure.
And next, he is an incredibly prolific composer with a vast library of well over 100 projects. Some of my personal favorites include Ghoulies, Laser Blast, and the criminally underappreciated Eliminators. Today, he joins us to discuss giving audible ambience to the Reanimator series and more. Please welcome Mr. Richard Band.
Hey there.
Hey,
Richard.
Hey, Brian. How are you?
Good.
Looking good. Here I am in my studio. I can't pick up the computer and walk you through it, but I think you can see the keyboard and a couple of posters and what have you. But this is where the magic is happening.
And you have made a lot of magic in your career, sir. Again, a big admirer of your work, and I got it a couple of years ago. I really like what you did with Dr. Heckle and Mr. Hype. That I know it's not the greatest movie in the world, but the playfulness that you put on into it and everything else. I thank you for that. I thought that was a great little piece.
Boy, you're going way back, aren't you? Oh,
well,
boy.
Yeah, that's how I got this job. I watched this stuff all growing up, and it never got it out of my head. But.
Well, I remember Richard referencing Dr. Heckle and Mr. Hype, or Sister Hype. Was that it?
Mr. Hype.
Mr. Hype, when he was working on the script, the score for Reanimator, actually, and he referenced it and said that the producers or director had, he thought, erred in not letting him write any kind of lighter themes, kind of more humorous themes, and he felt like Reanimator needed to have that element because, of course, Stuart had directed it already with a great sense of humor, and I always remember that comment by him.
Yeah, well, like I said, it goes back a long ways, but the director, Charles Griffith, actually. Interesting fellow. He actually wrote the original Little Shop of Horrors, the black and white Corman version. You know, with Jack Nicholson's very first role.
Yep.
Going into a dentist's office, a guy who loves pain.
Yep.
And it was one wacky film. But how could you pass up, even as wacky and crazy? How could you pass up something starring Oliver Reed? Right.
I know.
I mean. Come on, you know.
Oliver Reed is a demented podiatrist. That's crazy. Well, Richard, so glad to have you here. Thank you for joining us today.
Sure.
And next, she is an actress and writer whose body of work includes Robot Jocks, Fortress, and Space Truckers. Today, she joins us to discuss the role of Dr. Herod and so much more from her perspective. Please welcome Carolyn Purdy Gordon.
Hi, everybody.
Hi, Carolyn. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. Thanks for inviting me.
Oh, of course.
Good to be here.
Again, your appearances in these films, and of course your family relationship with one of its architects, of course, well known. And someday I'd love to hear about some of your early days in theater that you and Stuart were doing, the experimental stuff. Oh, I think she froze.
Yeah, we had a theater company in Chicago for 15 years. I'm sorry? I'm frozen?
Yeah, you're unfrozen now. You're
frozen.
Good. Okay.
Okay. Anyway, we had a theater company in Chicago for 15 years called the Organic Theater Company. And we did all original work, and we did a lot of touring. We toured Europe a couple of times, and we toured the Western United States. And we did a lot of, we did exclusively original plays or original adaptations of classics like The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, things like that.
Very nice.
I don't know what else I can tell you about it. Now, you're frozen.
Oh dear. All right. Well, one of us will unfreeze. I'll bring on our next guest. She is an actress and producer whose body of work. No,
come back to us, Patty.
I'm here. I think you're the one frozen. But let me bring on our next guest. She's an actress and producer whose body of work includes The Young and the Restless, Puppet Master, and Chopping Mall. Today, she joins us to discuss the role of Megan Elsie.
And say,
please welcome Barbara Crampton.
Hi.
Hey.
How are you?
We are well. How are you?
Great. You have the best radio voice with a nice face too, Patty.
Oh, my 80s horror crush just thought I was cute. Barbara, how are you?
Very well. Happy Memorial Day weekend.
Indeed. Happy weekend to you as well, and to anyone in our audience. Thank you, and anyone of our former servicemen. Thank you for your service as well to our country. Barbara, again, maybe sometime we can sit one-on-one. I'd love to talk to you about your greater body of work. You've done some very solid stuff. I mentioned Shopping Mall. Again, another fun one that I think is. I'll say it's undervalued, and I'll leave it there.
Okay, people seem to like it, so that's nice.
Yeah, well, to us 80s kids, and of course the mall being such a central focal point to social circles and stuff.
Yeah.
And who doesn't like killer robots?
Apparently, no one doesn't like them. Everyone does.
Yeah. Indeed. Well, thank you so much for joining us here today. It's a pleasure to have you.
Thank you.
And finally, he is an actor whose body of work includes The Frighteners, Dr. Mordred, Justice League, Batman, several versions of Star Trek. Today joins us to discuss the role of pencil punishing Herbert West. Please welcome back Jeffrey Combs.
Pencil punishing. I've never been labeled that way before, but I'll take
Jeffrey,
it.
you're a pencil punisher.
Mr.
Wow.
West, I suggest you get a pen.
I suggest you use a pen. One of the classic lines.
Absolutely. Jeffrey, how you doing?
I'm grand. Thank you for asking on this Memorial Day weekend. Here we are.
Indeed. Glad to have you back. Glad to have everyone else joining us for the first time. Welcome to the GalaxyCon virtual stage. We look forward to the day, and we are starting back our physical shows, but we can host guests like yourselves on our physical stages and get you back in front of your fans. In the meantime, we have this electronic forum. So glad to have you all here today to talk about this amazing film, and it's perfect. Oh, hey, let's all smile for Barbara.
Miss Carolyn, sorry. Okay.
Our team's going through the chat room right now, pulling out the questions for us. In the meantime, I just sort of like to sort of get a history of it because we have unique perspectives. We have Brian and Richard on both sides of the camera. So starting with, and Carolyn, I'm sure you have insight in this as well. So Carolyn and Brian, how did Reanimator begin?
It began as it was supposed to be a TV series at first, and then a mutual friend of Stuart's and Brian's, a guy named Bob
Greenberg.
Said, you should consider making this a movie, and I know just the guy to produce it. And he put Stuart and Brian in touch with each other, and they decided to make it into a film instead of a TV series. And Brian produced it and Stuart directed it. And the rest is history.
Brian, was it as succinct as that?
Yeah, I mean, I was looking to make a movie. I'd actually put I moved out to LA and I put an ad in Variety that said horror movie director wanted.
Oh my gosh, I never knew that.
Yeah. And that, in a circuitous way, it led me to Bob Greenberg, who was the guy who kind of introduced Hollywood to me, a wonderful person. And he told me that I had to meet Stuart Gordon. And I went to, and it was on I think it was Thanksgiving weekend or Thanksgiving week of 1983. I went to Chicago and went to the Organic Theater. And they had two, I saw the ER play, which had already been kind of a success. And then I saw one that was in development. And I was very impressed by Stuart and how he talked with the audience. And then I went up to Carolyn cooked us a dinner, and we up in their apartment, and we sat at the window and drank beer and talked about horror movies, and decided, he said, I have an idea to make, about H.P. Lovecraft's Reanimator. And he already had a script. It was, like Carolyn said, it was a TV pilot, which today that would be great because you would think limited series. Back then it was like, oh, really? I don't know. I don't think so. Right. But I wanted to make a movie. And believe it or not, within 6 months, within 1 year, 12 months later, almost to the day, we began shooting Reanimator in LA right after Thanksgiving. We shot the day after the Monday after Thanksgiving until I think the 23rd of, it was the 23rd of December. It was a 16-day shoot. But yeah, it was started right there in the Gordon's apartment in Chicago.
Wow. I miss the days when in the trades you could just buy ad space and just say, hey, guy looking for work, I do this, Well,
that just showed my naivety. I was just clueless. I had no idea what I was doing. I just knew that I wanted to make a horror movie and I needed a director. I got hundreds of replies. This is before fax machines.
Yeah.
So you can imagine everything was written.
So, and Jeffrey, Barbara, how do you find yourselves to be cast in these iconic roles?
Barbara?
Well, I was not the first person cast in the role. There was another girl that was cast, and her mother read the script, and then she said, you're not doing this movie. So they had to have an additional casting session, and I was brought in with a number of other ladies. And I read with Jeffrey and Bruce, not knowing that they already had the parts, and thinking at the time, oh my God, these guys are so good. I hope they get the parts, but they already had them. So basically they were just looking for somebody that would have chemistry with these two guys who were already cast. And I remember being in the casting session with our casting director, Anthony Barneo, and reading a few scenes, and then being asked, with the guys and with Stuart, and then being given some direction by Stuart, some adjustments, and then go. And my son is in the background. That's my son. He's home from college. That's Luke. Anyway,
what's his name? All right.
That's Luke. Yeah, he's home from college. I can't hear you, but he's having
5,000 people say hi, Luke.
I know. Well, it's 1 o'clock in the afternoon. This is when kids get up these days. So he's having some cereal. Anyway,
it's when I get up these days.
Yeah. So he's laughing a little bit in the background. Anyway, I was given some adjustments. We had to go back out and talk about it and think about it and work on it individually. And then came back in and did the scenes over and over again. And I feel like I was there. I don't know if you remember, Jeffrey, but I feel like I was there for a couple of hours. It seemed like it took a long time. And maybe they were telling other gals to go home, and then there was just a few of us left. But I kind of remember at the end, it was just me, maybe. I don't know if there was any other gals there. And then you guys. And then I think it was later that day or the next day, they said, you have the part.
Right.
What do you remember from that audition, Jeffrey? That
Well,
for me, my audition, because you already had the part.
You honestly, I don't recall all of that.
Oh,
I have kind
You
of a,
don't recall?
I have a
It
different
was at the church on Highland, right?
right. This is how it went for me.
no, I wasn't at the church on Highland, but go ahead. I was on La Brea. There was another little maybe that was Anthony's office. Yeah.
No, the La Brea one was the old Full Moon offices. They were on Fairfax, weren't they?
Was it Fairfax? I don't know. It was some small office. Yeah, maybe. It was a teeny tiny office.
Yeah, it was on Fairfax before they moved to La Brea. Anyway,
Okay. That's right.
I was doing a play, and Anthony Barneo, the casting director, for some reason came and saw it. I think one of the other actors invited a bunch of casting directors. And so he said, I'm casting something you might be right for. Okay, yeah, sure. And he came through with an audition. I met Stuart. I guess he liked what I did in my reading, and I got a call back. That's where I met Brian at the Methodist Church up there at Highland and Franklin. And that's also where I met David Gale. And then after I got the part, they said, okay, it's yours. They asked me to come in and read with a bunch of potential Dans and potential Megs. So
I was it at that point then, but then, I guess they must have had a Dan. They must have hired Bruce by then. And then mine was a different session.
Yeah.
It must have been because I was with both of you guys.
Yeah.
I don't know. Were you there, Brian?
I remember. I guess I remember the group sessions. I remember the sessions with Anthony Barneo, and that was a very small little office. And there would be mix and matching, but I never remember there being more than 2 people. But then again, don't trust my memory. I do remember very clearly the Methodist Church audition, because that's where it was big enough to have kind of everybody there. So I thought that's where I thought I saw you there, Barbara, but maybe it wasn't. Maybe that was later. I
think who I saw at the church was the young actress that they were keyed in on. What I got a sense that there was some discussion going on between her and her mother outside or something. And anyway, I wasn't paying too much attention because I had my own callback to deal with. There you go. But I do remember the good luck of being paired up with David Gale for my callback, and we did the scene where Dr. Hill comes down to the basement and points out that all this stuff has been stolen from Miskatonic. You will do what I say. So that was our scene. That's how we both got the gig.
Did the church know what kind of movie that you were working on?
I was waiting for that.
Well,
no,
and that's fair.
You know, the organic theater had a reputation for not just being successful and entertaining and original, but for kind of being sometimes shocking.
I know
on the edge. We were definitely
on
on
the
edge.
I think that kind of Stuart brought that to Reanimator. So the script certainly had some. And it still does. There's some kind of over-the-top moments, but I think that was all part of what Carolyn and Stuart had done for 10 years. They had been
avant-garde
for 10 years before Reanimator. This was not
15,
a
Brian.
first-time director. 15, okay. I mean, imagine that. We're used to a first-time director on a horror movie being someone who's like me and has no idea what's going on. But instead, you end up with all this wealth of experience and in the right direction for what, you know, the genre was back then.
Mhm.
Yeah, absolutely. And Richard, were you always on deck to do this, or did you come after principal photography? At what point did you step in?
It came later on. I remember very distinctly before I was on the project, going over to Stuart and Carolyn's, to their house actually, and Stuart and I had met very briefly in one of those offices, but then we needed to discuss the approach and all of this, you know, stuff, and see if we were compatible creatively and all that. And one of my fondest memories with Stuart and Carolyn was going over to the house, and the minute we both realized that we were huge Frank Zappa fans, we proceeded and spent the next 2 hours literally singing several Frank Zappa old albums. We were both huge fans, and we just sat and drank and smoked and sang Frank Zappa songs. So we knew we were sort of on the same page, as being out there cutting on all those.
Excuse me, Rick, just on the Frank, I guess you know what the ugliest part of your body is then. Do you remember that song?
Oh, yes. I think we were.
I'm sorry for interrupting.
Yeah, that's okay. We were going to San Francisco, moon over the Canton, the valley. That's back to the song, the Freak Out album of Zappa's. So we went through a good couple of albums that we both remembered, and we were both impressed with one another that we could remember it word for word.
Susie Cream Cheese?
Susie Cream Cheese.
Susie Cream Cheese. Let's check one thing out with you. You don't mind, do you, Susie?
You don't.
Let's get into you.
Exactly. So that we knew we were, simpatico with one another as far as sense of humor and, dry humor, sick humor, whatever. And from that point on, then everything was pretty much on track. We had a little bit of disagreement, Brian and myself and Stuart, because I think originally they were thinking that they wanted to make this a little more horror, and I wanted to put a little more of the humor in, like Brian had referred to before. And so there was a
when did that come? After you saw the picture lock that you said that?
Well, Stuart loved to tell one story, which was absolutely he loved to tell a story when he first showed me the film. And this was a rough cut, and it was at that point like 2 hours and 40 minutes long. It was like insane. It was the very first time I had seen it. It was a very early cut. And Stuart, I can't tell it the way he did, but it is what he did. What he told was very true, where we were sitting looking at it in the theater, and he kept looking over to me, and I had this very pensive look, like I'm looking and concentrating and trying. And he kept looking over, and soon enough, after about an hour and a half, he noticed that I wasn't so much thinking as I had fallen asleep.
Oh no! Oh no!
It was so long at that point. It was like, crazy. Obviously, I didn't stick to the whole thing. It was a little nod off or whatever, but he loved to tell that because it was sort of, true that I think a little bit needed to be cut out of the film at that point.
Barbara,
Well, I guarantee there's members of our audience in the chat room that I totally want to see the 2 hour 40-minute cut of Reanimator.
well, maybe not.
I wonder where that.
Barbara, do you remember us watching that? You, I, and Bruce. We went into the office.
Into the theater, right? There was like a little theater.
No, on La Brea. We went into a little office and we were allowed to look at like a 3/4 inch tape of it.
Yeah.
It was like, this is a long movie here.
Yeah. I do remember that. And I remember them letting us see what we called dailies back then too. We were able to watch a lot of the scenes. Yeah.
While shooting. After we were done, we'd go over to the lab where they had the day before's, dailies, and
Yeah.
we'd sit there, and that was helpful.
At Deluxe, you guys would go to Deluxe.
No, we
Oh.
actually, the dailies were shown right across the street from the Methodist Church across Highland.
Yes, they were right
Mhm.
there on Highland.
John Purdy's Hollywood screening room.
But
Yeah,
a lot of those
Wow.
first cuts are really long, right?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I mean,
Yeah,
it's
they are.
really normal.
Yeah.
Totally,
it's basically
totally
everything
normal.
that we shot put together. I mean, it was just
Yeah,
everything.
like an assembly.
In that
Assembly.
particular screening, it was just Stuart and I, because we were, working with trying to, get a handle on everything. So there was nobody else there, and it was really just to get a feeling of the film, and then to
Mhm.
get the next step creatively, and it was like I said, we all know it was very long originally, and
But how did we get it down to 88 minutes or whatever it is? I mean,
Yeah, Brian.
was that Lee Percy or was that you, Brian?
I
Or
would say that's Lee Percy. I mean, I certainly went to school on that movie, and I sat with it. We would remember Stuart after I would almost call that an assembly, almost more than a cut.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
so long.
Absolutely.
And
Yeah.
of course, I had the same experience showing it to people that you guys are, because we all just thought it was so great, and then it was kind of like, what? Why are people not responding as we think?
Brian, let me
Lee
ask you.
Percy is an excellent editor, and Stuart and Carolyn went back to Chicago. They had to go to work. The organic theater called, and so a lot of the cutting was done by sending VHSs to Stuart and then talking on the phone.
Wow.
like
and
mailing
doing-
him VHSs?
yeah,
I mean,
Wow.
that's
Insane.
then,
we didn't have quick
It
time.
must have
and
taken a
all
long time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Brian, what about Albert Band's contribution to the editing? I'm just curious.
Well, he did come in. He kind of didn't like Dr. Hill much.
Really?
Interesting.
What
was
did he
not
say
a
about
fan.
him? That's
I
so
don't know. He
interesting.
was just not a fan of. I think he thought
Huh.
that David Gale was just too
Arch?
too on the money with it. Yeah.
Oh,
But
well,
I
the
know
record
that
for-
was
for
a
people-
casting choice. It was a casting choice too, because I remember the part of Hill came down to David Gale, and I forget who the other actor was, but he was much more of a, what would I say, a normal looking guy, whereas David Gale was kind of like a Hammer Films guy. He could have been,
Mhm.
he could have
Yeah.
been with
He had that
Christopher Lee and-
Classic
His
gaunt
old-
look.
His old-
Exactly.
yeah.
And so I think that kind of, I mean, that's what I liked about David Gale was, because I like those movies. I like when it's right there, And I think that Albert was not, I don't know, he was quite not there, or he just, who knows? I don't know. People get a certain opinion about acting, what's good acting, bad acting.
Or, our choices. Yeah.
It should be pointed out for the people who don't know this already. Albert Band was the father of Richard Band and Charlie Band, and all of them were in the movie production business together.
Mhm.
They all worked at Full Moon.
Albert was John Huston's assistant back in the day.
Right.
Yeah.
And took Charlie and Richard to, you moved to Italy, didn't you, Richard? And when all those gladiator and spaghetti westerns were being made.
Yeah.
That was our upbringing. First to Sweden, and then after that
Wow.
to France, and then 11 years in Rome, where Jeffrey Wright, where that was when it was the Hollywood of Europe, and where all the spaghetti westerns were at their height, as well as all of the Hercules type movies. So
Yeah. It was.
my dad did a lot of those westerns and Hercules movies, and
The sword and sandal films.
Yes,
And
that's
were some of those shot in Croatia?
I'm sorry?
I thought the Hercules ones were shot in Croatia.
No,
Or is
Yugoslavia.
that wrong?
Yeah,
Well,
Yugoslavia.
well, that is Croatia's part of the old
Well,
Yugoslavia.
Yeah.
At that time, it was Yugoslavia.
Yeah.
Europe,
Richard's brother Charlie was
even though we were based in Rome and lived in Rome, a lot of the shoots that were done in either Yugoslavia, other parts of Italy, Spain, 2 or 3 times in Spain. Europe was all very close, so we would go, to various locations to actually do the shooting of the film.
Didn't
Go ahead, Brian.
Go ahead.
Didn't your brother actually play like Hercules' son or something in one of the
pictures?
Oh, wow.
Which I actually saw on TV one Saturday.
Yeah, it was
when I was a kid, and I remember being kind of impressed.
Yeah, he was
the guy who played Hercules' son.
The movie
I think it was
was
called Hercules in the Forbidden City or something.
No, it was called The Legend of Aeneas, and he played Aeneas' son in there, and he had a big role. He had a and he had a big role through the movie. That's right. So that was his first co-starring role, and definitely was part of the reason he would go into films. But we actually were in a couple of films together at a much younger age. I'd mentioned first we went to Sweden, and after my father broke off from Houston, other than being Houston's assistant for years, my father wrote the Red Badge of Courage, and was invited by Houston to go shoot the African Queen. That's where the split happened, because my father knew John Huston very well, and the real reason Huston wanted to do that movie is because he was an avid hunter and wanted to go to Africa to hunt, which he in fact did during all the shooting, and that's why it went about 8 months over schedule. He just go off days and weeks.
And of course, Clint Eastwood and White Hunter, Black Heart, a fictionalized version of that.
Right. So that's where the split off basically happened. And my father, we went to Sweden first to do